I have a priest friend who's been ordained just a couple years longer than I, who has a father who was diagnosed not too long ago with esophageal cancer. He had the surgery to remove his esophagus, which is very rough, as you can imagine, and maybe some of you know firsthand. And I check in with my friend fairly regularly to ask how his dad is doing. And he said, Dad was recovering pretty well, but then he was getting very foggy and things were very confused for him. So one day my mom took him to the urgent care and they transported him to the hospital, and they found that he has a brain tumor the size of a kiwi. So Mom took him home, and she keeps trying to help him, but he doesn't understand sometimes his own weakness, and he tries to do things that he shouldn't be doing. And so one day he was going to the bathroom without his walker, and on the way there he started to fall. And when my mom went to try to break his fall, she fell and got very injured. Injured enough she had to go to the hospital. And then when she was in the hospital being examined, they found out that she had an undiagnosed case of lymphoma. He's an only child. And his parish assignment is one of those real big ones, real big. In a rural part of the diocese, he has 6 parishes that he's responsible for. And times are tough there. His parents live in a totally different part of the diocese, and it's a 2-hour drive to get there. He's an only child. I said to him, I am so sorry. I don't even know what to say. And he said, it's the cross. He said, it's the cross. So I said, what helps? What can I do that would help? And he said, please just pray for me. And then he said to a group of us, hugs help too. And we all gave him big hugs. What else can we do? What we're talking about today and this week is the cross. That's what we're talking about, the cross. The cross is whatever in your life is most absurd, most unfair, the most senseless things that we go through, the cruelest things, the things that we can't fix or change. And nothing seems to help those things except watching patiently and praying and hugging each other. One of the things that makes the cross so difficult is that the people who sometimes want to or have the power to help us and comfort us, they don't know what to say because it's so absurd and it's so hard that they wind up pulling us into some doubt and some despair without intending to. Because we can see from looking in their faces that they're saying, wait a minute, where is God? Where is God when you're the only child and all of this stuff piles on you all at once? Where is God in the middle of that? Shouldn't God be saving you? It's what people said to Jesus on the cross. It's what the people jeering at him said. So you're the Son of God. Where's God now, Jesus? Shouldn't God be helping you? That's the cross. When even the people there to comfort you are asking you questions that make it worse. One of the things we learn from the cross of Jesus is something important to know about God. God does not swoop down and save us from the cross. God does not interrupt the cross. God does not rescue us from the cross. God did not do that for Jesus and does not seem much to do it for us. What God does instead is takes whatever that is and turns it into new life. God does not rescue us from the pain of the cross. God redeems the pain of the cross. God is not a rescuer. God is a redeemer. We may wish that God would stop whatever's happening and rescue us from it. But God, in God's wisdom, chooses instead to redeem whatever happens, whether it gets interrupted or not. So many people will be coming through the doors of this church over the next 7 days. And the reason is because this message is the most important message a human being could ever receive. And it is that the power of God can take even the worst thing that could ever happen and turn it into the best thing. The worst thing that ever happened in the history of the world is the time that God came to earth in the form of a human and we executed him. There's nothing that could be more absurd than that. We charged God with blasphemy and executed God, human beings. How could it get worse than that? So if God can turn that into Easter, imagine what God can do with your pain. Dare to imagine what God could possibly do with whatever is absurd and awful and painful in your life right now. Some of you have heard me talk about one of my favorite people, Sister Mary Frances. She came into my life back in 1999 when I was in my early 20s. I was working at a hospice in Utica, and I was recent college grad. I'd been an exchange student, and I was filled with all this excitement. I was a kind of naive, enthusiastic do-gooder. I wanted to do something positive in the world. She was in a similar place, though a different stage of life. She was in her 50s, and she had just been reborn into a brand new life as a nun. She had not been a Catholic her entire life, only a few years, and earlier in her life, she had been the mother of 3 children. They were my age, one of them exactly my age. And after they had grown, she was called to become Catholic and then became a sister of St. Francis. We maintained that friendship all these years. I grew into a priest in midlife, and she grew into an elder in her 70s. Her daughter entered a crisis in those intervening years. She wound up having a child, and the father was completely unhelpful and uninvolved in that boy's life. And she was in a terrible, terrible ongoing battle with addiction. Sister Mary Frances was devastated by seeing what her daughter was going through and thinking about what her grandson was going through, and so she asked the sisters if she could be assigned to South Carolina, where she could be with her daughter and her grandson and help them. And they said yes. And this nun in her late 60s adopted her own grandson so that her daughter could get the help that she needed. And she moved out of the convent and into an apartment and raised that little boy. And we all called her Sister Mary Frances, but he called her Mimi. This past year, the story was so much better. In the past 7 years, that daughter has come so far. She's gone through so much treatment. She was living on her own, getting her life back together. That little boy, that little toddler, he still lived with Mimi, and he was now in 5th grade. He and Mimi were a team, and she was doing a fantastic job with that little boy. But she was ready to hand him back to his mother. His mother was doing so much better and was in an apartment of her own and was having lots of visitation with her little boy. And soon the plan was that they would share custody, and then over time, Sister would give custody back to her daughter. And then it happened. The terrible car accident last April. And Sister Mary Frances died. And the daughter is not yet ready to have that little boy. And that little boy is grieving like you can only imagine. And I want God to save them from that. I don't approve of that. I don't think it's okay. I think it's absurd. I think it's senseless. I think it's cruel. And I think it's unfair. What I want is for God to swoop down and bring Mary Frances back to life. And if not that, then undo what happened somehow with that divine power. And if not that, then allow her daughter to win the lottery so that she can have what she needs to take care of that little boy. But God does not rescue us from life's pain. God redeems life's pain. God took the worst thing that could ever happen and turned it into the best thing ever. So I am being asked, and you are being asked, to consider, what then could God do with this? What then could God do with this pain? That's what this week is for us to sit with our most absurd, most unfair, most senseless, most cruel problem. Whatever it is, it's what we call the cross. And we are meant to sit with that and to ask ourselves, if God could take the very worst thing that could ever happen and turn it to the best thing in the history of the world, what can God do with this?